I messed up tonight. I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I'll just start again. I keep falling down. I keep on hitting the ground. I always get enough. See what's next. Birds don't just fly. They fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave. I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second episode of 2017. We are now at minute 15. This is the Zootopia Minute podcast, where we review and analyze Zootopia 1 minute at a time. So, I am your host, Choco, and I'm joined with my co-host.
Simul, how's everybody doing? Happy January.
Yep, happy January. And we start this minute off when all the animals are hooting and hollering as the new police chief walks into the room. And it ends when he says, and finally, our first, and then with cliffhanger.
Our first something.
Yeah.
So in this minute, our animal police officers receive their assignments for the day, and Judy's about to receive hers. That'll be in the next minute. We're not quite sure what's going to happen, because once again, we sort of have an important scene being cut in half by the way the minutes are laid out. So we'll have to wait a little bit on that one. But in the meantime, we have a whole lot of neat stuff that's happened in this minute. Kind of a lot of fun stuff.
Exactly.
So one of my favorite things in this minute is just the punniness that happens right away. And this movie has no shortage of puns because anytime you're working with a lot of animals, that opportunity is going to show up. So first, Chief Bogo, who is, what is he, a water buffalo?
He is a water buffalo.
Everybody's got a water buffalo. Yours is fat and mine is slow.
Voiced by the talented Idris Elba.
Idris Elba. Yeah.
Who...
Why does the water buffalo chief have an accent and no one else does?
Not sure. But he's the guy who everyone wants to play both Doctor Who and James Bond, so...
Really?
I don't know. Yeah. They've been petitioning to have Idris Elba play the Doctor and James Bond because I guess as a black British actor, he would be the first African to play these two iconic British characters. So he's the one that they continuously try to petition. In fact, Josh Whedon said he will not direct or write an episode of Doctor Who unless Idris Elba is the Doctor.
Isn't James Bond canonically white though?
Yeah, but you and me both know the controversy behind that.
All right, I'll get this out of the way because I'm sure people want to know. My perspective on the whole diversity in movies and stuff is, yes, good, but do not shoehorn it. If it makes sense for a character, go right ahead. But otherwise, don't force an actor with a different race into a character that has never been that race and never was really meant to be it. I keep seeing posts on Tumblr saying, like, wouldn't Harry Potter be great if Hermione was black and Ron was in a wheelchair and all this stuff? It's like, okay, great. If you want to see diversity in storytelling, write your own stories. Don't use up a story that's already been told. If you want to see that, make it happen. Be the change you want to see in the world. You know what I mean?
We actually did get a black Hermione in the official Harry Potter production. So
did we? When?
Yeah. In the Harry Potter play, Curse of the Child or Curse of the something
the
child.
The Cursed Child.
Yeah, it was a horrible play, but it was officially sanctioned by J.K. Rowling and everyone else, and we have a black actress playing Hermione, so it's actually official. And well, for that one, that's an interesting theory because in the book they don't necessarily mention her skin, but say she has frizzy hair. But yeah, I kind of understand where they're coming from. Of course,
the phrase they describe her white face and exactly
that's another
scene.
Thing which people keep on bringing up. But people say, it could be a figure of expression, but it's a very, very tricky issue. And I do mostly agree with you, but I also know, like, the other side of the argument will keep on saying, well, the Doctor, he's an alien. He could regenerate into any other form, so why hasn't he regenerated into a woman?
Right, if he's been Scottish now.
So I kind of understand both sides, even though I might fall on one side of the issue a little bit more. Yeah, the thing is, for example, me, with Taiwanese culture and Chinese heritage, if all of a sudden Mulan was played by a white woman, that definitely would not work because Mulan is historically Han Chinese.
Well, people are making a big deal over the new Ghost in the Shell live-action movie, where the actress playing the main character there is white. I don't recall who it is, but it's some big-name white actress.
See, that's some things that I would have differences in, because I know, so WB is currently, I think they might have finished filming the Death Note movie. I think they're also doing Ghost in the Shell and Death Note.
Wait, there was I didn't know they were making a Death Note movie.
Yeah, it's very under the radar, but L is played by some white actor, and L is played by a black actor, and Light is played by a white actor. But it kind of makes sense because it's reinterpreted as Death Note happening in the Western world, so in the United States. So that kind of makes sense that they recast some of the actors and to kind of fit the culture. So I don't think I have as much problems with that. But if it's like a character who's historically Chinese, so if Mulan or the Monkey King or any of the Chinese and Taoist gods that I grew up with were played by white actors, yeah, I would be a bit offended because you can't just change the race of the character to make diversity. But then also, whenever people do try to create like more diverse, they want to, like, we see it now in Marvel Comics especially. People are trying to create strong female characters, strong trans characters, strong, I guess, people of color. They are mostly underwhelming, and a lot of the time they're just kind of easily brushed aside, and we don't really see new growth with every time someone tries to create a new character that fills the mold. It's always the old white characters that overtake them, but it's a weird situation that it's hard to
another
argue.
issue is if you're going to make characters that are a bit different from what people are used to, you also have to make sure you still make it an interesting character. If the only interesting trait about your trans superhero is that they are trans, that doesn't make them an interesting character. It makes them rather shallow if that's the only interesting thing about them. Yeah. So you can't substitute diversity for good storytelling is the main thing.
That's the issue I had with a lot of the cartoons, kids cartoons they had in the 80s and 90s. They purposely tried to shoehorn diversity.
Oh yeah, it would be like the group of kids that was chosen by, Captain Planet. The cast of Captain Planet were a character from every single country.
Or like the Burger King kids, or even Recess. Recess was a good show, and actually that works.
I liked Recess.
Recess was actually a good example of where it worked. And then you also brought up an interesting point that a lot of the times more liberal comic creators or movie creators or TV show creators make a character where their only characteristic is that they are gay or trans or something. And that's really
what's
shallow
supposed to make them interesting, and it just doesn't. It just falls flat.
And actually, that's where I come from. So, for example, I'm Chinese, and I would love to see more Chinese characters in fiction, more Chinese Americans, more Asian Americans. But if the only point of that character being there is to make it diverse,
if
then
it's a token,
that would be offensive, because then it would diminish that character. So, for example, let's say in Doctor Who, they all of a sudden got a Chinese companion to play a role in Doctor Who, and that character was only selected because the actor was Chinese, and the actor was just underwhelming in performance. Then everyone else would use that as example, saying, that's what happens when you choose a Chinese actor. He's not going to be very good at the role. So, I don't know. It's kind of tricky. But I guess continuing off this trend of murky territory going in, aside from the quote-unquote gay couple in the previous few minutes we had, in this minute, this is
that
one
would be
that has been...
the roommates living next to Judy.
Yes. And in this specific minute, we also have a scene that's been heavily, heavily dissected by YouTube, by the Tumblrverse, by Reddit, by almost every single board, because there's two sides. So the hardcore feminists will try to argue this is a feminist movie, and the egalitarians will argue, no, this is more a egalitarian type of movie. And the one argument the egalitarians like to use is in this minute when Chief Bogo says, I want to address the elephant in the room.
Yes, that pun we mentioned earlier and never got to.
Yeah. If you catch it, he says Francine. And we shift to an elephant without tusk. And elephants without tusks are biologically female. I'm not going to assume her gender, but in the wild, elephants without tusks are female. And he addressed her as Francine, no tusk. So we have a female police officer in there. So Judy is not the token female cop in this room. She is the token bunny. But there's already female cops in this room, yes. And I think the polar bear in the front row as well, has some feminine features.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that polar bear does look more feminine for sure.
She looks like the polar bear that was training Judy.
Maybe it is. No, yeah. It wouldn't be.
But
maybe they're related.
so I'm not trying to shoehorn either side into one concrete position, but some people who proclaim themselves to be hardcore feminists use this movie as an example of promoting, I guess, feminist struggles within a male-dominated workplace, while some egalitarians who don't see it that way use this specific minute in that specific scene to point out, no, it's not talking about that. This I guess this workforce, this police workforce is already made up of males and females. It's just addressing how someone who might not be of physical stature has to work harder to make it in this world.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, also consider the fact that you had to sort of go at great lengths to even point out that this was a female character. It's not something the movie was trying to be very overt about.
Yeah. So there we go. We just tiptoed around a bunch of controversial things, which
yes,
we didn't even prepare for. We just kind of jumped right into it. So,
and I wear big steel-toed boots when I tiptoe around things. I like all my eggshells thoroughly smashed by the time I'm done walking through the room filled with them.
Well, going back to the elephant in the room thing, you mentioned that that's an animal pun. It works in our world because it's a human saying. But in this world full of animals, do you think that pun works?
That is interesting, right? Because he says, all right, we need to address the elephant in the room. And no one looks at Francine until he says, Francine. And everyone turns around really suddenly. So it's as if they're not expecting Francine to be the thing. So I want to know if that's still a common everyday phrase in this universe. I mean, how do you avoid that? It's like, all right, elephant in the room. I don't mean you. I mean figuratively the elephant. Sorry, I don't want to offend.
Like, I wonder if it is offensive. Yeah, because we already see a scene where just calling a bunny cute is considered offensive. So would using the phrase addressing the elephant in a room be offensive to elephants?
Yeah. I mean, clearly everyone loves Francine. She gets lots of birthday bumps right away. Judy seems kind of freaked out by that, actually. We look at her and she's watching this happen and she's like, oh my, oh wow. Bit of violence going on here. Okay, then.
Judy would not survive.
Yeah, like, just Judy wants to keep her birthday a secret so she doesn't just get pummeled into the ground.
I think the wolves can do it. The wolves can punch her and stuff.
Maybe.
I'm not sure if it's because we're talking about elephants, but I'm looking, so when we're doing this podcast, I'm looking directly at my wall. And there is a shape in the wall based around the paint spackles and crack that looks like an elephant head with trunk and everything. I think I should take this picture and I'll tweet it later when this episode's up.
You should. I want to see that random patch of wall.
That looks like an elephant.
Man, that's like... We recently put new floors in our downstairs bathroom, but before then, for a very long time, like more than a year, it was just bare concrete that had these patches in it. And if you were on the toilet or near the toilet, you would see these patterns and they became familiar to me. So I would recognize them between different times I'd be in there, and they got covered up recently. It was kind of sad. Because I'd like given them different names and everything.
You know what's strange? Every time there's like weird patterns, the first image I see is George Washington. I see George Washington a lot in...
I see historical figures, people wearing like period clothing.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's because I'm so used to seeing George Washington on the $1 bill that I see that kind of shape in a lot of things. Have you seen Lincoln? People say Abraham Lincoln appears a lot.
I don't see Lincoln. Lincoln doesn't look as old-timey as Washington does.
Because that reminds me of that, because we were talking about Recess earlier. I was thinking about that Recess episode where there's an Abraham Lincoln-shaped chip.
Well, I mean, speaking of gender inclusion, we have our female officers here, but actually, I guess over the next 5 years, the Federal Reserve is going to phase in new currency with female figures on them, I believe.
That's kind of funny.
Harriet Tubman is going to be on the 20, I think it was.
Yeah, I guess that marks. It's kind of funny because I am a numismatist. I've been collecting coins for a while now. Ever since I was a kid. So I'm a big fan of coin collecting. And what's ironic is actually males on coins are actually kind of a modern concept. Our first time we actually had male presidents on coins was actually after World War II. But before World War II, all of our coins had females on them. They were variations of Lady of Liberty or Columbia, the personification of America.
Right, so not real figures, but it was a feminine figure.
But it's funny because female figures dominated coins for at least the first 150 years of the nation's existence. And it's only after World War II that we started seeing male figures on coins.
Interesting. There's some historical perspective.
Harriet Tubman's interesting. I know that Jackson is a very, very controversial figure for our international listeners who might not know. Jackson is the first Democrat president of the United States of America. He's actually
He's the original jackass.
Yeah, that's where the Democrats get the mascot from, the donkey.
Yeah.
Comes from Jackson, who people called a jackass. For some, he was very, very highly regarded. He was a war hero in the War of 1812. But in some circles, he's also really looked down upon. He's known for the Trail of Tears, which is considered by a lot of Native Americans as genocide of their people. He's responsible for a lot of white supremacist movements and kind of was a racist individual. But a lot of people do see him as kind of a badass character as well. He's kind of like the Teddy Roosevelt of his time.
Someone once tried to assassinate him and he responded by running after them and beating them with his cane. So that's pretty cool.
And I think he's got into at least 50 duels. So this is back when they dueled by turning around and pointing pistols and shooting. And he would always allow his opponents to shoot first. And he has never lost any of these 50 duels he's been in, which is kind of scary. And what's funny is during his inauguration, so if you guys think the Trump inauguration is going to be crazy, during Jackson's inauguration, he opened the White House to the public and they all got drunk and trashed the White House. And the only way to end the inauguration party was to put kegs of beer on the White House lawn so people would come out of the White House to get the beer.
They had to lure them out. Beer! There's beer out here, guys. Come on out. Okay, now stay out. Go home. It's late.
So yeah, I guess like I say here at Tubman, who would you actually, if you had to choose a female to put on the dollar, who would you choose?
Oh,
or coin?
That's a good question, actually. Do you think there's any figure anyone could choose that isn't somewhat controversial for some reason?
Well, we already have Susan B. Anthony on the dollar and on the dollar coin, and we have Sacagawea.
Well. Yeah.
Because I would say, so actually we kind of had de facto female presence. Woodrow Wilson's second wife, when Woodrow Wilson was kind of out of, I think when his health was incapacitated, thank you. For about 9 months, he still signed laws and passed bills, but it was his wife who was doing all of it. It wasn't the vice president, his wife. So I think it's Edith Wilson was kind of like the president of the United States of that time period. But again, Woodrow Wilson's also another controversial Democratic president who history does not remember fondly.
Yeah, you got to go back a while before you start finding non-controversial characters. I don't think many people had an issue with Washington, for instance.
Yeah. Woodrow Wilson's, not Woodrow Wilson, FDR's wife.
Eleanor
is
Roosevelt.
Also, yeah. She's also his cousin, so he married his first cousin. She's one that people have also considered in high regard. And I think the problem is once we get to the modern first ladies, there's a lot of controversy because Jackie Kennedy is one that's a bit controversial. I would say Nancy Reagan. Want Nancy Reagan because she actually helped with pushing, she did a campaign to get kids off drugs. And I think that was very, very good for people. But people who don't like the Reagans might not like Nancy. And then vice versa, there's also Hillary Clinton.
I'm a fan of the Reagans generally, but I consider that specific thing to be a bad move. The Just Say No thing has been sort of disastrous.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't need to get into that.
Yeah, and then Hillary Clinton is the first female candidate for president for a major party. Also served, did a lot, probably one of the most influential first ladies that we have had. But again, of course, she's very unpopular at the moment, as proven by the recent election. So I'm not really sure. I think maybe Martha Washington would be a good choice.
Martha Washington? Betsy Ross, maybe.
Oh, that's another thing, because people, in retrospect, when historians are looking at the history, it's believed that she did not design the American flag as claimed, and that story was made up by her family just to kind of boost tourism.
Interesting how often that kind of thing happens. People have these misrepresentations of history that go down as the popular account. A lot of people don't even realize that Rosa Parks, the African-American woman who refused to surrender her seat on the bus for a white passenger, that was not just a spur-of-the-moment thing. That was planned out in advance for her to do that. I believe it was another lady that had happened to just on the moment. But Rosa Parks belonged to an organization that sort of wanted to make this message, and so they chose her to be the person to do it because they thought she was a better representative of the movement, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a problem, because if you choose any female who's relevant in civil rights or culture or politics specifically, there's going to be either Democrats or Republicans are going to oppose that choice.
Someone's going to oppose someone for any reason. That's just how it works. Yeah, I don't know.
Dolly Madison, actually, she saved the George Washington portrait, and I think she was the one who brought the jug of water to people, to the colonial soldiers on the battlefield.
Oh,
she might
there
work.
you go.
All right, then. So going back into the police room, we actually, for those of you who don't have the concept art book to look at the map of Zootopia, we actually have a clear view of the map of Zootopia in the background.
We do. I was so excited about that. We get this nice overview, and it sort of shows how the different environments are divided up. And I was right. It's sort of like a wedge with downtown in the middle and then the rest sort of radiating out from it. You have Tundra Town, you have the Rainforest District in the northwest, you have Sahara Square, and then you get Savannah Central, which does sort of blend in with downtown. But it's really cool to have this big overview. And on this overview, we catch a glimpse kind of what the issue is. The chief mentions there's a bunch of missing mammals, a bunch of missing persons, basically. And they're all predators, but they're coming from all over the city, all the way from a big, ferocious polar bear to a small, unintimidating otter. So first, this is our first little bit of intrigue entering into the plot here. And Judy perks up right away. Judy's super interested to know what's going on with this. And the chief is very quick to start handing out assignments. It's actually kind of funny, some of the names the chief mentions.
Yes.
More opportunities for puns. It's sort of a mix of punny animal names and then like totally normal sounding names, you know, like Grizzoli, Fangmeyer, Delgado. Oh, okay, Delgado. I have no idea what sort of animal Delgado is, but Grizzoli's probably a grizzly bear.
I don't know.
Fangmeyer is probably something with fangs. Then there's McHorn, Rhinowitz. I wonder what Rhinowitz... What if your name is Rhinowitz, but you're like a gazelle?
Do you think Rhinowitz is a Jewish rhino?
It's like, my name is Rhinowitz, but it's because we have rhinos in the family. I'm like once removed.
Then they couldn't breed.
Yeah, and then there's just Higgins, Snarlov, Trunkaby. Trunkaby is probably Francine, right? Francine Trunkaby.
Maybe. Well, it's interesting you brought up that there's a lot of animal puns in the dialogue. And I'm thinking back to BoJack Horseman, where most of the animal puns are more visual. But in this movie, it's more dialogue-based. So I think that's a kind of interesting thing, too. Because I was thinking, BoJack and Zootopia are both works that were nominated as Best Animated Works by the Critics' Choice Awards. And they both have a bunch of puns, animal-based puns in their works. So I was thinking, you can only do so much animal puns. Have they ever did the same pun? I don't think so yet.
We found the key. You want to get nominated for Best Animated Feature, just put a bunch of animal puns in your movie.
But it is interesting. I don't think there has been they have not shared the same pun yet. So I guess there's a lot of animal puns you could work with. But Zootopia does it more dialogue-based and BoJack does it more visual, which both work.
Well, of course, we're all very familiar with horse puns as well. MLP, My Little Pony, makes huge use of horse puns.
Yes. And speaking of that, I'm actually vending at the first pony convention of the year, Pacific PonyCon in San Diego. So I get to go back home to San Diego.
How fun.
I guess in the next episode, I'll tell you guys how it went.
Yeah, I've not been to that con, but I have been to San Diego. Some of my siblings are from there. I like it. They have a really great zoo. The San Diego Zoo is amazing.
I think it is a top zoo in the world. I'm very proud of the San Diego Zoo. Like, as a Californian, I claim we have the San Diego Zoo.
But they don't have zoo.org as their website, and Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle does. I'm always very surprised by that. Somehow our not super huge zoo. It's a nice zoo, but it's not like super huge. But we got the zoo.org URL. And the Puyallup Fair nearby has thefair.com. So we just get all the best URLs here.
I guess you guys are very techie. You kind of grabbed them up when the .com boom started happening, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. So I think that does it for this minute. Anything else you have to say?
Nothing too specific. This has been a very good minute to sort of show us getting into the plot, finally. It's been a lot of exposition. Now we're finally getting into the real meat here with these missing animals. We're going to find out in our next minute maybe a little more about that. And we'll find out what Judy's assignment is. I'm very excited to hear about that.
Yes, don't spoil us.
No spoilers till then.
So if you like us, you could follow us on Twitter at Zootopia Minute, and you could email us, send us your fanfics, your fan art, whatever you want, at zootopiaminute@gmail.com.
Indeed. If you want to follow us individually, I'm on there on the Twitters at Coledagneault, COLEDAIGNEAULT. Apologies for the spelling.
And I am on Twitter at meta_artist. And I will be vending at Pacific PonyCon. So if you are going, stop by my booth, which will be in front of the autograph booth, actually.
Indeed. All right. Until next time, take it easy.
Bye, everybody.